Here were some of my favorites from August 16th through the 22nd. As always, these are the ones that go around to friends, family, clients via text, but then I post them on my blog and just kind of like to go through some of the details. So I'll jump right into it. I wanted to get some images this year showing the molting. You know, I've been providing images to a lot of different people for a lot of different things, and one of the groups for the kiddos, I thought that this would be an interesting thing. The sea lions molt about once a year, and it tends to be around the pupping season. So you can see kind of as this sea lion changes from the older brown fur, kind of this newer silvery sheen for a little bit, and then it'll eventually kind of brown back out. Here's an example of one that's molting, one that's finished the molt, it looks like, and is kind of that silver look, and then the typical kind of chocolate brown that you would expect. And then I actually got a morning with a little bit of sunlight, a little window in the clouds, so went down and tried to capitalize on it. Some of the young sea lions playing around. And then one of the big males decided to be very photogenic and pose for me. This lighting, it's fun. It's kind of the first couple minutes. It's before the ground is illuminated, so it's sort of, you're working on it. The sun just barely coming over there's a mountain back there. Maybe not a mountain, but there's a hill or a cliff or something. And then you can get a little bit of light, bouncing off clouds or bouncing off the water. So you're able to use the contrast there. The rocky point, even with the water, is pretty dull, yet he's getting a lot of exposure on him. Also, I thought he had a funny face. This one I found interesting, not so much from a fine art perspective, but this lighting really illustrated its wounds. You can actually see a couple of them in the other shot too. But this time of year, they've been battling, the other males all during pupping season. And you see this guy's got a bunch of teeth mark up here along his neck flank. He's got some scrapes and some pretty good cuts down here by his flipper. So these guys are they're real deal about what they're up to when they start battling amongst the bigger ones. The little ones are tending to do it just as practice or as exercise or whatever, just to futz around. But these big boys, they're sending a message for sure. You can see that in these images. This is another one. I liked this one more at first than I really came to like it towards the end. Wasn't exactly my favorite once I went through it. Maybe if I would have cheated it in Photoshop or Lightroom a little bit more and taken out some of this highlight, but the highlight draws the eye kind of to the wrong spot. Although it's fun to see, the folds on this big animal, but it's not necessarily from a perspective of an artistic piece. It's definitely not one of my stronger ones, because your eye's drawn to not to where I want the subject to be. I want the subject to be the eye, the head, the sagittal crest, maybe this X of whitewash here, but where your eye naturally wants to go because of the way this is laid out is straight into its flank. So I think it's important, if I can tell you why I like a photo, I think it's important to be able to also, from my perspective, tell you why I don't like some of my photos. And, I was chatting with somebody this week, and I think that's one of the definitions of whether you're allowed to judge your own stuff, if you can judge it when it doesn't quite work too. So I try not to be convinced that all my stuff is without fault. This is a little guy near the wooden stairway, popping his head out. I thought it was kind of funny. Another look from the other angle. Teasing the light here, I think actually gives it something extra that the other shot doesn't really have. I think if I was going to post this photo on my website, I would probably Photoshop out some of the kid gunk around the eye and whatever. But yeah, just a quick look at that one. Another look at some molting. I wanted to get some shots of the molting in the light as well, because I had the good, golden hour blast of light. So you can see, again, this one is kind of split halfway through just about. It takes a lot of energy to do this, which is why it's, important to make sure that we're protective of these sea lions that are so close to, people in San Diego. We're really lucky to have that here. So with that luck comes a little bit of different, protections and work that we need to do. This guy, same thing. Actually, this is probably my favorite molting shot so far, because it does have a little bit of this light. So from a photographic point of view, it's like, okay, this one's got a little bit more than those original ones that were on an overcast day where the light's very, very dead across it. But on the same token, the ones where the light's dead, maybe as far as like a textbook example, they might make a little bit more sense because you don't lose so much of the detail and the shadowing. But anyway, I wanted some of each, I guess, of the molt this year. This one I just found funny. Working on ways to capitalize when the conditions aren't really doing what I want to do to grab what I want to grab. So I've been working on pan shots, and this one, typically when I just hold the shutter down, I'll get one as a bird flies by that pans, much more tightly, or there's much better focus in one than the others. Unfortunately, I haven't fully figured out how to call my wife back. I haven't fully figured out how to time it to where I can get the wings where I want. So the wings are in kind of a neutral position here. They're not they're neither up or down, which I think would add to some of the details of this particular one. But I did like that the kind of the hash marks on the feathering here. So I sent it around to friends and family. Couple looks at pelicans doing low angle approaches. The water was fairly shallow where the fish were right here. So rather than diving in and splatting out, they would kind of swoop in and then pivot around at the last second. You can see it sort of starting to drag its foot as it pivots in. You're going to get its mouth open kind of at an angle and go in and do that. I liked this one because it's got some detail in the spray off the foot as well as the eyeball. I like this one as well, even though you lose the eyeball because they close them to protect their eyes. But you can see, again, the feet stalling it out, going to use its momentum to drive its beak over where it thinks the bait fish are, and you can see it starting to open that. Another look. This one I didn't think color-wise was quite as strong as the other ones, but when I send them around, this one got a lot more attention. Kind of that squatty, gonna take off, using its feet. I don't know if I'm gonna just leave the ringing in these or if I'll edit it out. The low over the water, you can kind of see its reflection here. It's got some spray back here. Again, I kind of thought the other ones were stronger, but kind of the consensus was that this one was popular. I like this one solely because the green adds so much to this image, but I wish that it was a little bit different on the timing. But, it is kind of fun that you can see the details in the feet. You can see all of the they're not reeds. I get vegetation. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but kind of, it's lower tide. The tide's dropping. You can see where the tide marks had been, and sort of these small little, I don't want to say islands, but they're islandy at the river mouth of the San Diego River. Great blue heron, kind of get that last sliver of light. I thought it was kind of a fun shot in terms of, I only use natural lighting. I'm not really using flashes or reflectors or anything. So anytime I can get the natural light to behave, I'm impressed with myself. And then same kind of concept I was talking about earlier. I've been working with ideas to get images that will do what I want them to do in conditions that are not exactly ideal to me. So this is a pretty overcast day. So I thought, well, maybe if I shoot really detailed and then put it into black and white, pull the saturation out, maybe that'll work for me. So this particular one is 4731. So this isn't, honestly, these settings are pretty standard. Well, it's much slower than I usually shoot, but it's still the ISO 640 and the aperture 6.3. So it's you know, I ran the shutter down to 1/200 with when my big lens. I can do that off my monopod. Kind of. This is about where I can shoot down off my monopod and know that I'm going to get the result I want. The black and white aspect seems to give it a much more family base to me. I'm not exactly sure why I think that, but it just has that maybe homey, like, I don't know, something about pulling out the little bit of color takes it from that textbook shot to something that touches on a different emotion, and it's interesting, you know. So the light this day wasn't it was coming through filtered through overcast. So yeah, I've been working on that. To me, to really make the black and white work, you have to have the details really dialed in, though. This, when you get into the minutia of it, it's got to be dialed. Similarly, this photo of the yellow crowned night heron, I really like the details around its eye, both of its feathers, the eyeball, as well as this you know, transition into the beak. So, you know, certain things, like, you have to have that fine detail. There was a young harbor seal, kind of, I was standing up on the breakwater, and it was fairly resting on the edge of the water on a rock. So I was able to get a decent set of shots off of it. What I noted on this one, I really hadn't seen before, but the details on how the front claws on a harbor seal are hollow. And I'd never really seen it before, so I thought it was a cool shot illustrating that. This one, you can actually see the teeth as well as the hollow claws. Yeah, it's intriguing to me. I send these around to a lot of different groups, so they kind of take a look at a different veterinary set of data than maybe I'm taking a look at just from a terms of the photos I grab. But you can see, unlike the sea lion, it's also got these front teeth. So just a different setup. These guys are descendants from the otter family versus the sea lions, which are descendants from bears. Here is the harbor seal posing. And same concept with the black and white. Here is the mama and then the pup, and there happened to be a big male here. There's two shots of this. I don't know which one I like better. Part of me likes this one because, you know, it ties in this puddle of sea lions, and then it sort of just hides the male just enough that gives it maybe a little one extra something to it. But this one has maybe a little bit more, you know, you've got the eyes sort of connecting through this arc. So maybe this one's got a little bit more to it. You know, there's a little bit more expression or nuance or movement in the pup's face. But yeah, I'm just playing with different things that I like, see what stands out to me. Here is a sea lion. This is actually two different ones. One was in the bay, and this one was out in the ocean. This guy's got a kelp blanket wrapped around him, which was pretty funny. And then you can also see the line of teeth here. Seal Society posted some really great info on what it is that cakes onto their teeth to protect them. I wasn't bright enough to take a screenshot of it. It was on an earlier photo I had sent them, but they had something to say about that. Unfortunately, I can't recall what it was intelligently. These I really loved. I went out yesterday, and kind of the end of the storm, all the hurricane push has kind of gone past, so we're not seeing as much wind. It was, really smooth, really clear water. So anytime I can get the details as these dolphins are surfacing and begin to exhale, I find it really, really intriguing. I find it adds so much to the photo to be able to look at the individual bubbles, kind of put that together. Same thing here. I'm big into motion. I'm big into how motion takes you through an image. So, for me, I start here on the edge of the rostrum, and there's little bits of water still coming off, spray coming down the flanks into this bigger splash, and then you've got these individual bubbles as it pulses up and out. It really allows you to go through all the little aspects. You've got the mirror reflection here, which gives a different look on maybe what angle that water's coming off of. So, yeah, I always find these shots relaxing. Another look at a different one as it surfaces. You can see the hydraulic bulge as it's pushing the water up right before it splashes out through the surface. You've got the big exhale started here. I think I like this one a little more than the last one, just because it's got the splash coming up, starting off the rostrum as the rostrum breaks through the surface. You've got these two pieces off of the melon where you can see the water starting to split off, where it's going to split off the flanks. Those the bubbles here from the exhale are about to burst up through the surface. So this is that instant before everything changes is shown right here. And again, I think it adds so much when you have the details that sort of take you through the image, versus if it was a slower shutter. For me personally, that splash that's kind of blurred out maybe doesn't take me journeying through the image quite the same. And then yesterday we came across a juvenile humpback, and it turned out to be pretty interested in the boat. It came up pretty close a couple times, and then we gave it some room and let it do its thing. Looking at the photos when I got home, I mean, you can tell, even in real time, you can tell that there's a lot of markings on this whale. But when I got home, you could really see it's got a lot of scarring. I think it was probably entangled. I'm not 100% sure on that. I've reached out to some people in my circles to kind of get their input on what they think. It seems young for anything else to make sense, and it didn't seem like they had wounds that I would have thought correlated to. And again, I could be totally wrong, so if you've got an educated opinion and I'm wrong, awesome, let me know. But it doesn't seem to be rake marks or marks from a really big shark or a orca or something. It seems like all the marks are very linear, which is something I've seen in entanglement marks before. I actually reached out to some people in my circle to see if this one didn't raise its tail, so I'm not sure Happy Whale will be able to quantify it, but there is a lot of individual detail here on the dorsal. And I figured somebody, if it was entangled as bad as I thought it was, I think somebody must have done some work to get it clear, and maybe they would want to know, okay, well, it's in San Diego in late August and this is its condition. There's a lot to be said about getting these images in front of the people who can look at that and know what happened, what interactions have been taken. And again, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it had to have been entangled. I think it had to have been entangled enough that there was people involved to undo it. So anyway, that kind of wraps me for this week. If you're on my site, you can see all the photo settings down below and maybe a couple other odds and ends on the blog. If you're on a video hosting site, I do link my site below. I invite you to jump off the video hosting, come over to my site, check out this week as well as many other weeks worth of the things that I see out and about as a wildlife photographer here in San Diego. So thanks for the watch. I appreciate you guys.